What's up? It's Mike Mal, and you are listening to the Athletor Podcast, where we dive into the processes, mindsets, strategies of some of the most successful athletes and coaches from all walks of life. What's up? It's Mike. Athletor Podcast coming at you. This week's guest is Brandon Paulson. Brandon is a silver medal in the Olympics in 2000. He is now the head coach, one of the head coaches at Pinnacle Wrestling Club, which I consider one of the best wrestling clubs in the country. And the metric that we use, most world titles. Okay, that seems like a good metric to use. We do get into how he and Jared Lawrence started Pinnacle Wrestling and the direction that they took. We also lean on his financial background and talk to him a little bit about the ins and outs and things that he might have done differently had he known what he knows now about starting a wrestling club. All that and more coming at you at Athletor Podcast. Sit down, shut up, and listen. Athletor Podcast, Brandon Paulson. What's up, man? I am fired up to speak to you for many different reasons, but first of all, thank you very much for coming on, and we appreciate your time.
High pace, baby. Let's go.
Let's go.
Ready to go.
Love the high pace. Here, okay. Love the fight. I love that you have it on your hat. I love that you have it on your singlets, your kids' singlets. I love that it is something that is said along with, and it's conveyed in everything that you do. Where'd you come up with that? It's more than just a slogan, man. For me, it kind of epitomizes Pinnacle's entire aura.
Yeah, it's a whole lot of different things. Part of it is like enjoying the battle on the mat, which I got from Steve Frazier. He was a longtime national team coach for Greco-Roman, and he was always enjoy the battle. And to me, that was like the on the mat, like, let's get in there and let's fight, right? Let's hand fight. Let's try to push yourself to the limit, try to do everything you can to win that match. And so that was kind of the part of it. And then, my last few years of wrestling, it was a little bit more of everything else that goes into it. My attitude towards training, my attitude towards my diet, my attitude towards my sleep, my work, and then now my career, my family. It's what are you bringing into every situation? And are you looking forward to that? Are you looking forward to okay, this week I got 3 weeks, 4 weeks where I got to get my weight down. What kind of attitude am I gonna have about discipline of what I'm eating? Am I gonna look at it like I got to cut weight, or am I gonna be like, oh, hey, I'm ready to be healthy. I'm ready to feel good, make my body feel good by eating more nutritious, or so that's all part of it. And into coaching, it's like love the fight for me. Like I got to go coach some 6 and 7-year-olds. That's not always easy, right? I got to have the attitude like, okay, I'm trying to help these guys and trying to get these guys better and do my best. So it's a lot about the attitude you bring to everything. And lastly, not lastly, but there's a lot of different things. But it's just because it's hard doesn't mean it's bad, right?
Right.
And I grew up and sometimes I felt that it was like, this is really hard. So man, this is no fun. But hard can be good. Like this can by the end of my career, I loved the hard practices where I pushed myself till I really, couldn't anymore. And I love those more than any other practices. It's like, just because it's hard, it can be good. And if you can get the kids to believe in that hard things are fun things sometimes, and hard things can be good, and are good. So that's kind of the whole love the fight. And I think the kids, we talk about it a lot and different portions of it, and the kids really believe in it, and you can see it even in our college guys. I think we have 5, 6 of them that have love the fight tattooed on their arm or their back or somewhere like that. So they believe it. And when things get tough, it's like in college wrestling, man, you're a freshman in college, it gets tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, okay, I got something to fall back on. It's like, man, I just gotta love the fight. This is hard, but I gotta love the fight. And I believe that they believe it. So to me, that's been pretty cool.
Hey, don't go anywhere. It's Mike. We'll get back to the podcast in just a second. We got to pay the bills though. Do you have an athlete that's looking to break into the social media space? We at athletorlive.com have a brand new in-depth tutorial done by none other than Caden Henshaw. If you don't know who Caden is, he's not even a Division I wrestler, yet he's got hundreds of thousands of engaged followers. Learn how to create engaging content, grow your followers, and open up new opportunities in the NIL space. Go to athletorlive.com/Caden and we'll give you the first module completely free. It's been awesome to see, but let me ask you this. How difficult is it to convey to kids in 2024, 2025? A lot of stuff is rounded, so to speak. A lot of the edges have been rounded in our culture. How do you convey that to a bunch of kids that maybe don't have to fight every day?
Yeah, and it's gotten harder, I would say, over the last 5-6 years, to be honest. And really, we start talking about maybe later even than we used to, where maybe after maturity and when we know they actually want to be there and their parents aren't bringing them there. So it's kind of hard for me to convey it to the younger kids. But to be honest, like I had a kid go through a time where he didn't want to wrestle when he was young, and it was it wasn't that much fun for him. But I was like, you need to do something hard because you're going through life, and life is easy right now, right? And life is never really easy, but for some kids it's like he lives in a middle class household and life is relatively easy. Everything came pretty easy to him, as far as getting friends and school and getting along with his teachers and athletics, except wrestling, and that was hard for him. And I was like, you need to do this. And there was about a 3-year period. Is like he practiced once a week, and that was it. But I was like, you just got to do it once a week because it's hard, and that's good for you. And to be honest, he ended up loving the sport at about 7th, 8th grade ish, and made a huge jump after that. And now it stopped being hard, and he started to love it. So um, there's just a lot to learn about wrestling. Just wrestling's a hard sport, and that's again that's a good thing. And I think parents see it sometimes, where it's like kids need to do something that's not always easy for them. So it is hard though, like the high school kids, and sometimes not just hard, but sometimes frustrating, for me to, as I talk about this, but then I watch them in the practice room and they're not really following through. But then you got the guys that do, right? And you got the guys that are going to run through a wall for you, and not just for you, for themselves as well, that will do whatever, and go through the pain and the joy of learning, and it's not just all about a fight, a battle. It's about
No,
learning too. Some people struggle different ways, right?
for sure. My son,
Technique.
that's where we're at right now. My son, I I'm having a really hard time getting him to accept the challenge of learning very intricate things. He will
Yeah,
wrestle live all freaking day. He's got a motor on him, right? Like but
yeah,
he wrestles like an idiot. Truth be
yeah,
told, he wrestles. I mean, I love him, right? But he wrestles like an idiot.
yeah,
How many times you got to do the same thing, get your head pounded in to realize, like, hey, man, that's not working. But he'll do it, right? So he likes the hard things, but I'm getting him to understand, or I'm trying to get him to understand that you have to accept the challenge of this specific skill set now. It is not just about running through a wall anymore. You can run through walls, but that's going to hurt your head eventually.
yeah.
So how do you get them to accept certain challenges that maybe aren't just the output of energy?
Right. And that's really what I'm saying with how many components of there is love to fight. Like different people have different struggles. So you have to just, in a group, we have pretty large size. So you got to figure out, okay, what is his, man, he wrestles hard, but gosh, he's just not figuring out. So his struggle is really, figuring out that technique or body positioning, or just concentration as well. You know, a lot of times it's concentration when it is there, and trying to work with them on that, but also tell them that, hey, we understand this happens to a lot of people, right? So you got to try to enjoy the process of learning as well. You know, so some people need to learn how to work hard. Some people need to learn how to wrestle at a higher pace. Some people need to learn how to learn new techniques and how to drill properly or play or spar properly so they can get better. And a lot of times when they're not very good at it, then they don't like it as much, right? So love the fight, man. You got to love the fight. This is what you have to have the attitude for you. The attitude is for this part of your wrestling, you know. So
Yeah. It's tricky stuff though, man. It is. It gets tricky because then all of a sudden I'm insulting his work ethic. I'm not insulting your work ethic. I'm insulting your focus on specifics. So it does get tricky, man.
yeah.
Okay, can you run us now? We had Jared on a while back, but can we? I would love to get the origin story from your perspective on how Pinnacle started and how it's kind of grown into what I think of as the most successful wrestling club in the country. And by that, the metric that I'm using is youth age level world championships because you got a lot. So how did you and Jared kind of build this thing from the ground up?
Yeah, you know, Jared started when he was training like a kind of a once a week deal for youth on like a Sunday at the University of Minnesota, and then maybe a little bit for high school at like a high school and kind of a part-time while he was training type thing. And at the time, I we trained together. Like I was Greco, he was freestyle, but we are in the same practice room. Um, so it was kind of the Minnesota Storm training together. So we knew each other. And then I was done, and he kept going, competing for like another 4 years. And during that time, I started working with him a little bit, just partly, upstairs, and then like some technique stuff of where I'd look at his matches and, kind of talk to him about, what I saw, just another view of, he was just trying to get better. So he was looking for input. Um, so, we knew each other through that. And I had coached a long time um, in a freestyle club. Right. I started when I was 18, I started coaching. And, so it was just part time, and I was working otherwise. And then after I was done and I started coaching Jake Deichler, hopefully you remember him, but
I do.
and I
Oh
started
wait.
helping out at high school, and I was like, this is fun. And Jared at one time, it was almost off hands, like, hey, I have Pinnacle, but it's like, we just kind of we do a little bit here and a little bit there. And if you ever want to do something, let me know. So Deichler made the Olympic team after senior year. And it was probably 3 or 4 months after that, and I was like, man, I want to coach wrestling. And I was working at the time. I had a full-time job, and I was like, this it's my passion. That's what I want to do. So I, called up Jared, and we had a meeting, and we're like, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and we're going to get a facility. We're going to go full-time, both of us. And so I quit my job, and we got a facility, and basically worked our butt off to get people there. Luckily, we had a really good group the first year of really youth, which is when you're building the club, it's like a high school. You start with the youth, right? And then you
Mhm.
build them up, and the way, your style of wrestling, or they all have different styles, but the way you believe development should be, and then more will come. And basically kind of as we were like, if we get guys better, people will come. And that's so our goal was, it was just, that was kind of the business plan, was make wrestlers better and do whatever we can to do that. So it started off, and we had decent numbers that first year, and it just kept growing. And now it's moved into a bigger facility, and there's always been growing pains. We have different groups that come through that are really good, and then we have a little bit of a lull, and then we have another really group coming in, and then you have a lull. It's very interesting to see, and we see the lull coming, but it's hard. So um, we've enjoyed it, and we believe in our system of what we do for development. Now we've had guys that have been with us since they're 4. and came all the way through, and now we don't start till 6, but you know what I mean? They've been there for 12
Yeah.
years and now they're wrestling in college. And so it's very rewarding in that way to see guys continue through with it and continue to wrestle in college and hopefully international and love the sport. So
Yeah. So here's what's interesting to me, and this is a dynamic that I think Pinnacle has that I don't know if many other clubs across the country have. You have a very high level Greco guy and a very high level freestyle guy kind of meeting in the middle to create a system that everyone can kind of take pieces from. Was that part of the idea going in, or did it just kind of evolve that way?
yeah, I think it just evolved that way. We have different strengths, and we both believed in each other, right? So it was like, I was we both believe ties are important, control ties, like you control your opponent, you control the match. So we wanted to be able to get a not as good athlete be able to beat better athletes, and you can do that by controlling your opponent. That's 2-on-1s and underhooks, but it's not necessarily a Greco 2-on-1 and underhook, but it 2-on-1s and underhooks in general can control your opponent, right? Where you can control them, and you can have the advantage on offense and defense that way. And and you got collar tie and inside position or whatever. So is some of those things we believed in. He's also like a longer, skinnier wrestler, and I was more of a shorter, stronger wrestler. So you got the power compared to a little bit more leverage. And, so we teach different things to different people, but also, try to give everybody a little chance at everything. But we come in with like, well, this is what works for me. And even now, like I'll feel something. I'm like, if I'm extended, this doesn't feel good to me. So I'm going to do this instead. And he's like, well, I feel pretty comfortable right there because I could do this and this. So we'll show both and be like, okay, you guys probably over here. You could try this, but so just different styles that way as well. I think has worked really well. Just because we have a wide, you in a wrestling room, we have a lot of kids, right? And so you got to do what's best for them, and everything isn't for everybody. And you got to realize that everybody can't do what I do or what Jared does or anybody. Everybody is a little bit different. So we kind of have a wide breadth there, and we got a lot of different coaches now in the room that help us on a part-time basis, and they're all different as well. So that's really helped as well, getting their input and trying to learn from them as well. We continue to try to evolve. So
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this then. Where did Ryder Rogotsky get his style from? You or Jared?
that's not a style. Um
We just
that's
talked
kind
to
of a
Tom Ryan for the last
self-taught.
hour.
That's oh my gosh. Well, here's the thing. We know he's super strong,
Mhm.
and when he's out in the he's a nice kid. When he's out in the mat,
Mhm.
he's super mean. And
Mhm.
so he does these things that are really wrong. And but then you can also teach them, and it took a long time really to try to break some habits, and some you just like go for it, right?
Go do it.
But some they're like, okay, now you might not really ever should ever shoot from space, so let's get to an underhook, or let's grab an arm, a 2-on-1, and squeeze it off, because that's what he wants to do, is squeeze you until something breaks, you know so try to teach him things that's going to work for him, and he's still going to have his other stuff. It's like, okay, you don't need to drill that. That's just going to happen for you, right? So now let's do a
You don't
few
need
other
to drill
things that
this.
might work. Well, he doesn't need to drill that anymore. That's like
No.
his arm is super flexible and strong, so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
bottom is a great position to pin people.
Yeah.
So
As it
yeah,
turns out, as
he's
it
fun to
turns out,
watch, and he wants to pin people. That's what he does. So we'll see
it's
going through college if he can continue to improve. And when he came home the last time and we talked, he's almost more open to get better and listen. And so I think it's actually, I think in college, I think he will be able to improve, because I think he's more coachable now than he ever has been. And some people don't ever. They get to college and that's it. They're
Yeah,
not going to improve. And I think he can because he is still coachable, even though he does some different things.
for sure. No, look, and I'm goofing about the style and
No,
stuff
yeah.
like that. But the truth of the matter is, good on you. Not just you and Coach Lawrence, but the rest of the people around him for kind of giving him some flexibility, no pun intended, um, in what he can do. Like there's a lot of coaches out there, especially guys who made their living like you, just digging an underhook and muscling people off the mat, that wouldn't be open to the idea of, look, man, if you reach back and pin somebody, go ahead, have at it. I mean, there's something to be said for that type of philosophy. Do you find yourself, because of his success, giving some of these kids a little bit more leeway earlier on?
Yeah, and you still want to show the basics, right? There's some basics to wrestling, and they've been like that. They worked 30, 40 years ago, and they're still working, and you still want guys to have basics. But I watched Dylan Ness wrestle through college, so it's like, I mean, there was nothing basic about that dude, and you know, I don't, I don't really teach, but I'm not going to teach what he does because he had a ridiculous sense of what he did, and so it's just he's a more extreme example, but it's people do what they do, and you just got to try to build it. But there's some things that every like little kid will do, and it's like, okay, that really does not really work in high school unless or in college unless you're like the best in the country at it,
Mm-hmm.
or a top 0.5% of strength, so some of the things, it's like, okay, you're giving them your hips here, so if you're going to do this, you might get picked up and slammed. But hey, if you're the best at it, go ahead and keep trying. But here's another alternative, and let's be able to do both.
Yeah.
So and kids get it, I think, eventually. So, um, but you have to be flexible in any coaching and every kid, and not necessarily saying you can't do this, but hey, let's continue to evolve here and let's work on this as well because this will work for your whole life. And so not telling them they're wrong, it's just you know continue to evolve.
Here's a different way. Here's another way. How about
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
So I kind of want to go back to, you and I have similar paths through wrestling clubs in that we had a full time job, we gave it up early in our lives to basically, if we're going to be honest about it, we're laying our financial future on the heads of children, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so like, that didn't go over very well with my wife at the time. Of course, she saw the light afterwards, but what was the conversation like with your wife after leaving a full time job to go into, well, I want to coach kids how to wrestle and how to fight?
Yeah. The funny thing is, it was harder with my dad because my dad was my boss. So my dad owns a, he's a general contractor basically. And, I had originally planned on taking over his business, and I was good at the business part of it. And that's kind of my, background for school. And I actually, I was into finance and stuff after college. And then, I helped run his business, but I wasn't a mechanical mind. So like he built homes, and I wasn't good like out on the job site. And I was like very frustrating. And so it wasn't very natural for me. But I had planned on taking over the business or contracting or whatever at some time. And this was going to be 10 years down the road. But, I eventually talked to him, and I was like, and he loves wrestling, and he coached me since I was 6. And, he's still coaching, and he's 70 something. He was at Fargo for like 30 straight years, So anyways, I was like, Dad, I'm going to quit, and, I'm going to join up with Jared, and we're going to open a wrestling club, and at first he was like, well, there's no money in it. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But, um,
Yep, well learned.
so that was a hard conversation. My wife she's a little different. She's like, do what your passion is, and we'll figure it out. And she had a good job. She's a physical therapist, And, she's a person that, I retired wrestling when I was 30, and that was 2004 when I lost to Dennis in the Olympic trials finals. In 2007, she's, and I was still training Jake, I was still wrestling, and I was done. She's like, "You sure you don't want to come back?" I'm like, kind of a weird thing for a wife
Yeah.
I'm turning 34 pretty soon to say, but that's how she is. She's like, "What's your passion? What do you love?" So when I said I wanted to coach, she's like, "Okay, we'll figure it out." And it wasn't too bad. We had to, okay, how are we gonna manage this first year or two and figure that part out. But really, when my last few years of training, it was like I worked, then I quit my job. My wife got pregnant, and I was like, I'm quitting my job to wrestle, and not make any money. And so she had a baby. I stayed home with the baby while I trained, and I would bring her in to lift every day. And I'd normally have somebody help me watch her at night when I went in to wrestle, but sometimes then I just had to wrestle at night after my wife got home. So I was a stay-at-home dad. My wife worked full time. Um, so it's not like something she knows wrestling and what my passion is. So it wasn't like probably a very big surprise to her.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now you brought up your daughter, who is a high level gymnast. And one of the things that I don't know anything about gymnastics. Not that I don't care to, but I just don't care to. But one thing I did know is that you seem to bring the same intensity to the stands at a gymnastics meet that some might expect at a wrestling meet. How was that received by people in the gymnastics community?
I don't care. um, so I'm a coach when I'm in wrestling and when I'm not in wrestling. Like if I'm a fan, I'm a fan. I'm trying to get the fans going. My daughter, I love to watch gymnastics, and I loved like where she was at Utah. There was she would get 14,000 fans, and um, but I want them to be loud. So sometimes I would have to be the cheerleader, and if we were on away meets, I'd have to get our crowd going, and I'm okay with that. Because I don't really that I'm loud anyways when I'm a fan. I'm just a fan. I'm not coaching anymore. I'm not yelling certain moves at her, obviously. And really, to be honest, like for gymnastics, it was interesting because she went through the elite kind of path where she tried to make an Olympic team in 2016, didn't make it. She was like a top 15, but four make it. But during that time, it's super quiet. It's like this intense, nobody likes anybody, and very intense. Like, it's almost like the whole gym, it's not a gym. They're, the Excel Center, they're 18,000 people, but not 18,000 people, but 18,000 seats. But I couldn't say anything. It was like she didn't want me to yell her name beforehand. She didn't want me to yell her name after or whatever. It was like I had to stay quiet. So um, I was really nervous all the time, and so I stayed quiet. And then she got to college, and I cheered for her a few times, and obviously I'm a little loud. And she's like, "God, the girls love it when you're cheering for them. You're our cheerleader." And then after that, I was like, "Okay, I got my daughter's blessing. It's all over." So
It's over.
I was gonna be loud if it got the girls pumped up, awesome. And so I tried when the crowd was silent. I was gonna be the loud one, and now my son plays actually football in college, and now I'm the same way. I'm gonna be out supporting him, but not just him, his team, and try to keep him going, and roll College, baby, St. Thomas, let's go. So
Yeah, dude, but it was super cool to see, man. Like it looked to me like a little bit of a person out of their element, or a person that was in their element, but everybody else was just now finding out what type of intensity we kind of bring to the table. And I get
yeah,
that, right? Like because my father-in-law is a pretty mild-mannered person, and like I'm a little bit of a bigger personality, right? And I get that. So it was really nice to see how intense we can be and unforgiving. Like, I don't care what you think of it. Like, it is what it is, man. It was really cool to see. You brought up 14,000, 18,000 at a match or a gymnastics meet. Where are we at in terms of how would you look at the landscape of NCAA wrestling as it sits in 2024, 2025? We're not getting 14 to 16,000 at every dual meet. I mean, unless you're in Iowa, unless you're at Carver Hawkeye or Penn State, you're not getting that many. Where do you see it right now? It looks like it's a weird world that we're living in.
Yeah, and that's, I think, been forever to me. Like, um, it's really interesting going from the wrestling world to the gymnastics world, to be honest. So the gymnastics, I bet there's 10 teams that average, 9 to 14,000, maybe even more. Um, but they go to nationals, and the nationals is like 4 to 5,000. It's and you watch NCAA wrestling, and you got like two teams that average 14,000 or what, however
Mm-hmm.
many a big crowd base. And then
Mm-hmm.
everybody else is very low, but then you go to nationals and it's sold out. It's
Mm-hmm.
you can't sit anywhere. Um, so yeah, it's a hard deal. I don't know. I think gymnastics brings out not just gymnasts, where I think wrestling people bring out wrestlers like to watch the college meets. I'm not sure if we need more production. Like when Jay Robinson was at the U, he put on a show,
Yeah.
and it wasn't easy. I mean, there's a lot of work, a lot of begging the athletic director to, spend money. And I don't know if it would still work, but he raised the level of attendance. I mean, every year they would have at least one or two that had huge amount of fans. And, but it's not easy. And I'm not the production guy. That's not my deal. But would that make it better? Would people come? I mean, at University of Utah Gymnastics, it's a show, man. Like, there's stuff going on in the hallways. There's, fireworks going on in the gym. There's music going all the time. There's not silent, it's a show. And I don't know, so every little kid in Utah, little girls want to go, right? And
Yeah.
their families bring them, and it's like an event where I just don't know if a wrestling meet is an event. It's
Mm.
the people who love wrestling go and watch, or
Yeah.
the fans of these wrestlers from that city go and watch. Um, how do you change that? I'm not sure I know the answer to that. How do you market that, and how do you make it an event? And making an event, do wrestling people care about that as much? Probably not as much as gymnasts. So,
Right.
there's a lot of questions there. And, I think wrestling NCAA level, we got a lot to think about, or coming up just with the changes in NCAA and paying athletes, and not just NIL, but more how much money are they going to have to spend on scholarships for wrestlers if they're giving 100 out to football, and however many to the women's sports as well, and then basketball, and do we have enough scholarships for wrestling would be my more worry.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's funny that you say that because we had Cole out on, I don't know, what was that, a couple weeks ago,
You know,
and he seems real concerned about, and he's obviously at a different situation at the Naval Academy, in that every athlete has scholarship, so it doesn't really affect him. But these roster caps and the revenue sharing are, it looks like, are going to be the downfall of a good many wrestling teams here in the next couple months and years. Um, I know you speak to a lot of these NCAA coaches, and it's probably a little bit easier for you because you're not as in it, right? Like, you're not in the middle of it. Like, we just got off the phone with Tom Ryan. He's in it. Like he is in the middle of it right now. And so, how do you see the landscape of NCAA wrestling changing because of these roster caps and because of things like NIL?
Yeah, that's a tough one. There's still donors, right? There's still money. And, as you talked about that, and I said, I don't know if they're corresponding, but if we had 8,000 fans at a wrestling meet, they're not dropping that sport.
Mhm.
You get fans behind you. If you have 8,000 fans, that means there's donors there as well, and
Sure.
you're breaking even on whatever the events that you're putting on, or whatever. You have 1,500, then you're not. But what's going to happen? Yeah, I don't know. I heard Cole talk about it, and I didn't even think about it that way, but it was true about, like, a lot of the walk-ons were some of the big donors later on, and I know a couple programs where that's definitely the case. Um, so we'll see what happens on that end. He talked more about roster caps, and I've heard that as well, but where is the money coming from for scholarships for some of the teams that just they support wrestling because, it's Olympic sport and they kind of need to support it, but how quick would the acts come? And I'm really, and this maybe is a little different, but I've worried since RTC started, and I'm a big senior level guy. Like,
Yeah.
freestyle and Greco is my favorite. Like, I want to support the senior level wrestlers. To me that, freestyle and Greco, I'd love if that was in college. But when the RTC started and all this money was going to RTCs, and now the NIL is there as well, I've always thought, like, since it started, like, shouldn't we be endowing scholarships? Like, can we, instead of all this money going to the RTCs, which I want some of it because, I got guys, Pat Smith, who is getting paid by Gopher Wrestling Club or whatever, guys, that are part of it, that wrestled for me. But man, if we want to save college programs, we need money for endowments. Like, should some of this be going to that instead of this? And I problem is I really support senior level wrestling too. So I'm not sure, how that works, but endowing
Well,
scholarships
there's
would
only
be,
so many times you can have your hand out, right? I mean, there's
yeah,
just only so many times that we can ask
yeah,
these donors, I need more. I need more. Well, what's it for? At least in a scholarship position, you can say, look, this kid is directly going to be impacted by your gift, by your donation.
yeah,
Um, it's tricky right now, Coach. It's really tricky. But I guess my roundabout way of questioning is how much of this now is going to fall on clubs like Pinnacle to train RTC athletes? How much of this is going to, how is this going to change your, I don't want to say business model because that's not the best way. How is this going to affect your business as a
yeah.
club owner?
Yeah, and I've thought about that, especially this year. Really, to me, is the big change. And if there's not college scholarships, how is that changing what I'm doing? Or if there's 50% less, does that mean there's going to be less wrestlers, or is there? To me, um, and this is Jared and I kind of are different on this. Like, I wrestled because I loved it and I wanted to be the best in the world. And I never thought about money when I was wrestling. Like, never thought about a college scholarship. I never thought about winning a world title to get, back then it might have been, I don't even know, 40 grand or something like that. Um, I never thought about money when I was wrestling. It just wasn't a deal. It wasn't what I thought about. But a lot of kids are wrestling to get a college scholarship. And it just, um, I just never thought that way. But nothing wrong with that thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can get your way paid for to school, or, which I understand, you couldn't get into some of these schools that our kids are getting into unless they had wrestling.
Fair.
So that is awesome. I mean, we've had what, I mean, a dozen go to Ivy Leagues. We've had three or four go to Stanford, and some of these great schools. And it's not easy to get in unless you're wrestling, right? So
Yeah.
so wrestling can get you to that level, but for me, it just wasn't what I thought about. But are these parents gonna keep bringing a kid to a club if there is no money available? So that's something that we got to think about. Like, okay, college scholarships, there's only 50%. Um, your kid's college may not be getting paid for. Do you still want to go to club? But I really think that wrestling is a great sport, and the things that you get out of it, I I think clubs could even become bigger.
Yeah.
And some colleges could turn into be a club sport, and colleges around, you know, I mean, the University of Minnesota, I think is fine. They're not going to get dropped,
Mhm.
but I think there could be a club kind of basis for college athletics as well, that for people that want to wrestle and have a group. And a lot of it is like you're going in, and this was kind of some of the people get a little bit of money, and you still got to pay for college, but it's always having a group of people in college that's going to help you along, a group of friends that have the same kind of values as you do. um and that's a huge part of it as well. Like, it's not just about the money. It's like, okay, I'm going to the University of Minnesota or South Dakota State or Wyoming to wrestle. Now I'm going through academics, and I have other people around me that are similar, that are, that I have through these 4 years or 5 years or whatever it is, or 8 years now. But no, just kidding. That that are similar to me, and that's a huge benefit too. So we'll see where it ends up going. I'm not, clubs could get bigger. It could be a club sport at some time. And to me, my goal is to get wrestlers better, teach them, lessons in life. And if I continue to teach them that, I think the club's going to be okay. And um, I hope NCAA wrestling is here for good. And I think it's important that some people won't go to college unless there was wrestling. So
Mhm.
I hope the NCAA understands that like you're sending a lot of kids to college that won't go to college. If
Right.
you cut these scholarships, there's that much less going to college that wouldn't. So we'll see what happens, but you know, uh, we're try to get people better and try to get them to be better people, and I think we'll be okay.
I agree. If you, and this is because you have a financial background and you now have years as a club owner to look back on it and have the wisdom of years. If you had to start it all over again tomorrow, what would you have done differently, if anything at all?
Um, I would say maybe after the first couple of years, I would have tried to, you know, save a little bit more money to try to buy a facility. I
Mm,
think 15 years, because we're leasing a facility and we have 15 years ago, they were affordable. 10 years ago, they were affordable. 5 years ago, they were not. Like
mm,
in our era or area, they doubled from 10 years ago to 5 years ago, like doubled in price. And then it basically took us out of the buying market, and like we couldn't do it. Um, and now it's just like the prices around Minneapolis, just it doesn't work. It was like, okay, we have to take half of our salary and it's going to go towards this building, along with, I
mm,
mean, we're paying a lot for our lease, but along with, we're going to do that and our salary. Can I do that? I can't afford
mhm.
that. Um, so if we'd have bought early, it probably would have been better, and that's just financial things. But
Sure.
that would have, you know, made retirement a little bit easier on me probably at some time.
Mhm,
As far as the way we ran our club, um, I wouldn't have ran it any different. I think especially at the beginning, we tried to keep the quality up, and we always try to have, enough coaches for our athletes and not skimp on that, and try to get the best coaches in there. Um, along with us, and we're there, basically every practice unless we're traveling at a
Traveling.
wrestling tournament or if we're whatever, we take a family time. But Jared and I are at every practice. Um, well, Sundays we got 4 practices. 3 is maximum. Otherwise,
Right.
your
Yeah.
results go down. But anyways, but we have a lot of good coaches, and I'm happy that we did that with who we have. And so I think running the actual practices and our setup has been good. Um, and we've made a living off of a club wrestling, which has been great. So it's really, maybe in the last few years we thought about having a second location. We just didn't want to split up. And
Mhm.
maybe 5 years ago we probably could have done it and didn't. We didn't pull the trigger. Um, and now we're starting one, but kind of small. So we'll see.
Yeah. What about the fundraising aspect of it? Um, how how much fundraising do you do now for the club, and how much would you have done earlier in your career had you known its value?
Uh, so we are a for-profit club, but we have a nonprofit that assists in items to keep the cost down for our athletes, is like bringing kids to tournaments, and that type of thing, or bringing coaches to tournaments and trying to help the kids that way. So it's like our club, basically they're paying to be part of our
Mhm.
classes, and then we'll go places, do tournaments, but then the booster club pays for that. So it's um and then if guys are going to worlds, the booster club will help with that because that's hardly ever fully funded now. Or like if there's something with a family or something like that, or a scholarship. um, it's so we don't do a ton of it. We do have a small portion, and I don't know. To me, as I don't like asking, people are paying to go to our club, so I don't like asking the mass majority to fundraise for us.
Sure.
That's like I don't know, I because it's something that I didn't
I
like to
understand
do
what
with my
you're
kids, you know.
saying.
But if there was people that wanted to help and like, okay, hey, you need a kid with a scholarship, I can help. Or you got a guy going to worlds, I have the ability to help. Um, I'd be more apt to um, help up with that compared to trying to get these everyday families that have to fundraise for their high school team, to do ours. And we do a little bit. We just try to make it not very time consuming and money consuming on their part because they're already paying enough in tuition, so
Just so you know, though, like having the 501(c)(3) as a separate entity is probably more than it's probably more foresight than I'd say 90% of the clubs in the country. Just having the foresight to do that is probably more than 90% of the clubs in the country. And that type of stuff becomes really, really integral to like like getting coaches out to Super 32 or P&L events or to whatever the heck, man. That's a big deal, and it becomes a daunting process if it's not in place. Um,
you know
and while nobody loves the idea of going out and fundraising as a gig, it is becoming a fairly integral part of the sport right now, like just
yeah
overall. And I think
you know
you guys do have a leg up on it, whether you focalize all your efforts on it or not. Coach Paulson, don't think, just
okay.
answer. You ready? Here we go. Best wrestling shoe of
Oh,
all
my
time.
mind isn't that fast. I told you before, Mike, my mind isn't that fast here, right? I'm
I,
getting old.
I
I'm
believe
like
the
over
quote
50
was,
now somewhere.
I believe the quote was, I got hit in the head a lot.
Yes, I have. I like to think about it. Like ask Jared, like he'll ask me a question, I'll be like, I'll get back to you tomorrow. It's okay.
All
Shoot
right,
me.
best wrestling shoe of all time. What do you got?
Nike Free.
Really? All
Yeah,
right.
I've been a coach longer than I am a wrestler. I'm all for the comfort, baby.
All right. Fair enough. Fair enough.
And
Fair
when I
enough.
was a kid,
Okay.
wrestling shoes were something I put on. But now I like the comfort, and yeah, and they're comfortable with me.
All right, fair enough. You only get four. They got to be American. Who is on your Mount Rushmore of wrestling?
So I thought about this because I thought this might come up, and I've heard some of your others, and you said it's all my criteria, right?
Fair enough.
So I get my own criteria. So I got a little different here for you. So
All right.
you don't want to hear the same answers all the time.
I don't. I love it.
Yeah. Okay. So one, Helen Maroulis, best woman
Love it.
wrestler I've ever seen. Three-time Olympic medalist, Olympic gold medalist.
Mhm.
She's still young, so we'll see how she changes women's wrestling as a sport going forward. Of course, there's like Shannon Miller, who you always think about, kind of revolutionized it, and but I think
Mhm.
she's the best I've ever seen. So we got one, the best women wrestler I've
Helen.
ever seen. Dennis Hall, best Greco-Roman
Mhm.
wrestler I've ever seen. World champion. He to me started the 11 years of American Greco winning. I mean, there was like 4 years we won three medals in the Olympics or World Championships, and he really
Sure.
started it in '95. He was a world champion. 10 years before he had was the last world champion, and so there's only been five, right?
Mhm.
And I think he made everybody better, including myself. But many medalists were because of him. And when we won it in 2007, a lot of that was he started it, and um, and to me, kind of raised the level. And Rulon Gardner, obviously, no offense to him, but to me, Dennis was the best Greco-Roman wrestler I've ever seen. Next
Sure.
easy one, best folk style wrestler I've ever seen, Kale Sanderson. I mean, and obviously with his coaching now and 159, not only 159-0, but man, you watch that guy wrestle and it was like, well, wrestling's not this easy. It's not, and it
Right.
was so
Right.
easy. Um,
Just
just
reach down,
yeah,
grab a leg.
come on.
Just reach down, grab a leg. Like
Yeah.
that's it. That's it. Jeez
The
Louise. I think
last
about it all
one
the
is
time.
a hard one for me though, right?
All right.
So you got the best men's freestyler of all time. You got John Smith and you got Jordan Burroughs, and um, to me, and
Huh?
obviously those two people have argued back and forth. I'm going to have to go with J Dub, John Smith, just with the six in a row, two Olympics. There was 10 weights, so it's a little different. Um, I think Jordan Burroughs might have been a more benefactor of success for maybe, he kind of led a generation of success for USA. I think John Smith might have revolutionized wrestling with his low single, which kind of his picks too. It's like it's similar attacking ankles, which obviously a lot of Americans have had success with, and so I'm going J Dub on that one. So that I
J
mean
Dub.
those two though are like that was really hard for me just as I was thinking about it, just because Jordan, man, he's ridiculous, right? And I to me it was like listening to Sidikoff, who's one of my favorite wrestlers to watch, and he's like, man, you could never relax wrestling that guy. That guy's super strong, super fast, and you're always in danger, and but so yeah, I gave you my four, which is different than any other four, I think.
That is true. That is very, very true. 100%. We have not had that combination before at all. Okay. Last question. You got a magic wand and you can change one thing about the sport of wrestling, Coach Paulson. What would you change? It changes tomorrow.
Changes tomorrow. NCAA wrestling went to Greco and freestyle. It's
Which or both? So we get
uh
two teams?
both,
Okay.
both. That I mean, they have to go both styles, man. Wrestling's hard. Let's go. They have to go both styles, and it's or I don't care how it is, but they got both. Man, we would
Yeah.
cry. To me, just those are my two favorite styles. Since I started out wrestling freestyle when I was 6, and started wrestling Greco when I was 10, and maybe folk style when I was 12. Like, so I started with those styles, and that's just always
Mm,
been my favorite. And you know, man, if that could, if it wouldn't detract. I think it would be exciting and it would be fun, and not just for the Olympics. I think it would obviously help the U.S. and Greco, at the Olympics. I think freestyle, it may help, but that's not even the reason why. I enjoy those styles. I enjoy watching them. I enjoy, wrestling them and coaching them. And not that nothing wrong with folk style. Like,
Oh, it's
I
fine.
love wrestling. So, but that would be my change. And I would like to say no cutting weight, or change cutting weight, but I haven't found a solution to it. So
It's really hard. No, it's tricky, man, because there's always going to be somebody that just kind of, yeah. Look, we've talked. You and I have talked about. Jared and I have talked
yeah,
about how do we innovate? How do we do this? And look, people that don't know, I play a small part in the P&L, and we're trying really hard to kind
yeah,
of move this
it's,
thing to a place where we don't need to do this, man. We don't need to
yeah,
do this. God knows. I mean, it's gotten better. Don't get me wrong. It has gotten better because God
yeah,
knows you and I probably cut way more weight than kids do now, but there's still a long way to go. We can do this. Like there are simple solutions.
yeah, for that, I think just especially at like the youth level, you want kids to love the sport, and there ain't nothing for a youth kid to cut weight. Just that is not making them love the sport, and if the kid learns to love the sport and they wrestle through high school, up into high school, and they already love it, then it's, the kid's he's gonna work hard, he's gonna do what's necessary, it's but you start cutting a kid, and you cut a kid down when he's 10 and he has success. Well, the kid kind of wants to do it again, but is miserable doing it. And the dad or mom is like, hey, this is what you got to do if you want to win, but it's like, so it's reinforcing not a good thing. And then you just see it. It's like the kid, when he has to make a choice about wrestling and he doesn't like it, it's like, okay, well, practice isn't that important to me because this really isn't that much of a fun of a sport. So yeah, but what are you going to do? You know, mad
Yeah,
side land.
it's
Yeah,
yeah, well, we talked about this, and one of the things that like I said, at the P&L we were talking about was maybe this American Scale Company has an app. Well, what if we just said you have to weigh in 3 times a week, and you
yeah,
can't compete anywhere past 3 pounds of where you weighed in every
right.
single. I mean, there are ways to do it, but you're right. It is wholly complicated. And there's always going to be that one dad that tries to, get his kid the next medal. And that's
Yeah.
not exactly what we're trying to do. Anyway, now that we fixed all the world's problems, Coach Paulson, thank you so much for taking some time out and talking to us for a little bit and imparting some wisdom. I appreciate it.
Hi, Mike. Good talking to you.
Wait. Don't go anywhere before you hit that next button. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, do us a huge favor. Click that subscribe button. And if you're so inclined, leave a review and share it.